Hey everyone, let's talk about individualism, communitarianism, rights and responsibilities. So, you have two pretty simple articles this week, which really only scratch the surface. Right now that we've gotten out of our section on the Constitution and the amendments, we're going to jump into a discussion about where the individual is placed in the group and that relationship to the larger social and political structure. And we'll break it down a little bit so it's not so crazy. And then the rights and responsibilities that come with being in the society that we live in, because everybody's rights and responsibilities are really culturally defined for the most part, unless they're also legally defined, and usually they're related. So this is something I've been confronted with as of late from my buddy John Mearsheimer. He's not my friend. He's an important academic. And he and many others that I follow have posited something that I have long rejected, or I wanted to reject. You're going to have to ask yourself this question. Are we individuals, born as individuals, these atomized, solitary creatures, and then we join groups, our family, our friends, the community, the workplace, what have you? Voluntary associations, right? Just like Putnam talks about. Or are we, in fact, social creatures that at a certain stage in our development carve out an identity, an individual identity for ourselves within this community? I think the second one is true. And this is coming from somebody who has pretty strong libertarian leanings. I want my maximum personal freedom and all that. But it's hard to deny, just based on human socialization, anthropology, and a whole host of personal lifetime experiences, we're social creatures. Now, whether one or the other is true is not so much the point. You'll decide this for yourself, because ultimately you have to figure out, between a discussion on individualism and a discussion on communitarianism, where you feel most comfortable and where your values position you. Now, there's a broader spectrum here, and so I want to give you this spectrum to kind of have a spatial concept. Let's say that over here is collectivism, Marxism, right? Radical equality, equity, forced on people for the good of the group. You don't get to make your own decisions. You do not have your life, liberty, or your pursuit of happiness. You do what you're told to do because it's what the collective needs you to do. And consider this, that throughout human history, this was without the trappings of utopia and equality. It was very much people's lives. You did what you were told to do. You did what your culture, what your circumstances, what your religion, family, whatever demanded of you. You had very little personal freedom, right? So whether it's old tyrannical, oppressive societies, modern sort of, Soviet Maoist types of Marxism, collectivism, very few to zero personal civil liberties. Then communitarianism. Communitarianism, put forward by Amitai Etzioni, is a balance that he's attempting to strike between the excesses of individualism with the excesses and oppression of collectivism. And so he's one of the guys that we're going to talk about in the article about communitarianism this week. He developed responsive communitarianism. He's a prolific writer. He's written like 30-some books. Then you have this sort of gulf in the middle, and then you have individualism, right? This is a long-standing Western concept that was first toyed with in ancient Greece, manifested in various ways through Judeo-Christian writing, and maybe even, I'm not as familiar with individualism in the Quran. I'm familiar with other elements of the Quran, but not that particular. And then in the modern Enlightenment in France, in the UK, in Scotland, right, we had writers talking about the individual and the primacy of the individual and the inherent or natural rights that a human ought to have because they exist, that a government shouldn't be able to take away. That's individualism. This is largely what our Declaration of Independence is based upon. And then a step further than that is radical individualism. And we distinguish radical from individualism, I think, for this important reason, which is somewhat covered in the individualism article. I'm an individual, and I want my rights, and I want to do what I want to do. But I understand that I have obligations and connections to my society, my community, my family, my children, my wife, my workplace that limit, right, all the things that I could possibly do, right? Here are all the things I could possibly do, the infinite choices of things I could have. And then here are the things that don't get me killed. And then here are the things that benefit me. And here are the things that benefit me and my family and my society. And all of a sudden, my choices become far more limited because of these connections that I have, and also I don't want to die. Radical individualism just says, nah, your standards, your social mores, your Overton window, your expectations, your societal needs, I don't care. I reject them. And we live in a pretty radically individualistic society, particularly here in America. More so than most any other place, and more so than at any other time in history. And social media certainly plays a role in this, but just the development of our culture over time towards a much more rights-based society, not all that healthy. Now, remember over here, collectivism, Marxism, forced equality, bad, but also radical individualism, like a disconnect from any social or cultural responsibilities. These are both bad. Etzioni is getting a little bit more towards the group, but he wants to find that balance where there is a concern for the group and a concern for the individual. Now, this necessarily means that in a society like ours, if we were to move in this communitarian direction, theoretically, you would be giving up some personal rights. I don't know what those are. Devil's in the details, right? But all of the things that you can do whenever you want, however you want, there are going to be limits on those things now. Let's take an example from the other side of the spectrum over here, Japan. Modern Japan, not old school Japan, right? Even modern Japan, it's liberal, it's progressive in many ways, but they are very communalistic. They are a very tight-knit society. And there's a lot of, China's another example. Guanxi is a term it's like nepotism. It's about networks and connections and obligations, and it's even quid pro quo, things that we think are bad and create illegitimacy and inefficiency. They say, no, it's about connections and holding people in society together, which is a substantially different perspective. And that's important to understand. They are just different perspectives. They both come with their benefits and drawbacks. So on the far end over here, bad collectivism, terribly oppressive and tyrannical. On the far end over here, you have nearly just chaos. You have these atomized individuals, disconnected, socially dislocated. You get anxiety, you get narcissism, you get psychopathic behavior. It's very unhealthy. These extremes are bad. We should, in most cases, and in this one, we should want to find some kind of balance towards the middle. I want a society that respects my individual rights, but my society needs someone that cares about the well-being of the society and will sometimes sacrifice what the individual wants, right, when it appropriately benefits the group. Tough balance to strike. So consider that. And then there's the videos about rights and responsibilities. And we don't talk about responsibilities as much, but consider, what does a society look like with only rights and no responsibilities? Maybe you can conceive of that. It's kind of hard to do. And the flip, consider a society with only responsibilities and no rights. Well, that actually kind of looks like that collectivist / historical human oppression where no one had any rights, but you definitely had lots of responsibilities. That's actually something easier to understand. Maybe when you were 16 or 17 years old, you had lots and lots of freedom and very few obligations. Either way, the reality, and you'll have to pick one for your assignment and argue for it, but in reality, almost all of us understand, when you think about it, it's two sides of the same coin. It's yin and yang, right? Rights and responsibilities go hand in hand, especially in our society with the way it's designed, right? My rights are your responsibility, and your rights are my responsibility. You don't just get one without the other. The older you get, from childhood into adulthood, you amass all of these new rights and freedoms, but they come with a huge number of responsibilities to not be a total fuck, not be a total screw up. Sorry. So, how does the individual relate to the group? Once you determine whatever it is you determine, right, how that relationship should work, should we focus more on the rights of the individual or the strength or the cohesion or the health of the group? There are drawbacks and benefits to focusing on either. Then start to consider, now, what does that mean for how we organize society on a large scale? And what do we want our government to do once we've decided on those things? And this will get you set up for information to come next. So, talk soon.